The bathroom mirror was fogged, my skin still damp from the shower. When the door creaked open, I froze, towel half-draped, heart slamming against my ribs as David's shadow loomed in the doorway. In that split second, I was 19 again, raw and exposed. The boy who'd spent years hiding who he was in the suffocating small town of Ashwood, Vermont. What do you do when the one person you've loved in secret for years walks in on you at your most vulnerable? For me, Jasper Klein, it wasn't just the nakedness of my body. It was the nakedness of my soul, laid bare in that fleeting moment. David's eyes met mine, wide and unreadable, before he turned and left without a word, leaving a silence so heavy it crushed the air from the room. It was autumn 2025, and I'd come back to Ashwood after 4 years at college in Boston, chasing a degree in environmental science and a life where I could be myself. Ashwood was a postcard of red barns and rolling hills, but beneath its charm lay a town that whispered judgment behind closed doors. I'd grown up here, the only son of a hardware store owner, my dad's pride pinned on me being the right kind of man. By 16, I knew I wasn't that man. I liked guys, always had, but in Ashwood, that truth was a secret you buried deep. David Monroe was different. He'd moved to Ashwood when we were 14, a city kid from Chicago with a sharp wit and a smile that could unravel you. He was black, confident, with a laugh that echoed through the school hallways, and he never seemed to care what anyone thought. We became friends fast. Late-night talks by the river, sneaking beers from his uncle's fridge, sharing dreams of escaping to places where we could be free. I never told him how my heart raced when he slung an arm around me, or how I memorized the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. Why do you think some truths are harder to speak than others? For me, it was fear. Not just of losing David, but of losing the only place I'd ever called home. That fear kept me silent through high school, through college, until that moment in the bathroom when David saw me, really saw me and said nothing. Now, standing in my childhood bedroom, I replayed that moment. The house was quiet, my dad at the store, the hum of Ashwood's slow life filtering through the window. I'd come back for a month to help with the store while Dad recovered from knee surgery, but being back felt like stepping into a skin I'd outgrown. David had stayed in Ashwood after high school, working at the local community center, coaching kids soccer, and living in a small apartment above the bakery. I'd seen him around town since I got back, always with that same easy smile, but something unspoken lingered between us. What does silence mean when it comes from someone you love? I pulled on a flannel shirt and headed out, determined to find David and figure out what his quiet exit meant. The air was crisp, leaves crunching under my boots as I walked toward the community center. Ashwood's main street was alive with Saturday morning bustle, farmers' market stalls, kids chasing each other, old folks gossiping outside the diner. I spotted David across the street, leaning against a lamppost, talking to a group of teenagers. He wore a faded denim jacket, his locks tied back, and when he saw me, his smile faltered just enough to notice. "Hey, Jasper," he called, waving me over. The teens scattered, and we were alone, the weight of yesterday's moment hanging between us. "You good?" Was I good? My pulse was racing, my mind a tangle of questions. Why didn't you say anything? Why did you look at me like that? Instead, I nodded, shoving my hands in my pockets. "Yeah, you." He shrugged, his eyes searching mine. "Always." But there was a flicker in his gaze, something that said he wasn't as unbothered as he seemed. We walked toward the park, falling into the old rhythm of our friendship, but every step felt charged, like we were circling something neither of us dared name. What happens when the person you're afraid to lose is also the one you're afraid to love? We sat on a bench under a massive oak, its leaves a riot of red and gold. The park was quiet, save for the rustle of wind and the distant laughter of kids. I wanted to ask about yesterday, to spill everything I'd kept locked away, but the words stuck in my throat. Jasper, David said suddenly, his voice low. You ever feel like you're running out of time to say something? My breath caught. What would you say if you knew the next words could change everything? I looked at him, his face half lit by the sinking sun, and felt the weight of all my unsaid truths. Yeah, I whispered. All the time. David's question hung in the air, raw and unguarded. The park bench creaked under us, the autumn chill creeping through my jacket. I wanted to answer, to tell him how every day felt like a countdown to courage I hadn't found yet, but fear clawed at me. What makes some moments feel like they could break you open or build you anew? He leaned back, staring at the sky, his hands clasped behind his head. You remember that summer we camped by Lake Willow? He asked, his voice softer now. You were so scared of the dark, but you wouldn't admit it. Kept saying you were fine, while jumping at every twig snap. I laughed, the memory loosening something in my chest. You were worse. You swore that raccoon was a bear. He grinned, and for a moment, it was just us, two kids with no secrets. But we weren't kids anymore. I was 23, he was 24, and the weight of unspoken things pressed harder now. Why do some memories feel like promises we didn't keep? We walked toward the lake, the same one from that summer, its surface a mirror for the fiery trees. David talked about his work at the community center, how he was trying to give the kids in Ashwood a safe space to be themselves. This town's tough on people who don't fit the mold, he said, kicking a pebble. You know that better than most. Did he know? My heart stuttered. I'd never told him about the nights I'd spent agonizing over my feelings, the way I'd watched him from across classrooms, terrified he'd see through me. Yeah, I said, my voice tight. It's why I left. He stopped walking, turning to face me. But you came back. His eyes held mine, searching, like he was trying to solve a puzzle I hadn't given him the pieces for. What do you see when someone looks at you like they're seeing you for the first time? I had to, I said, meaning more than just Dad's surgery. There's unfinished stuff here. He nodded but didn't push. Instead, he gestured to a food truck parked by the lake, its neon sign buzzing, tacos and dreams. We grabbed tacos and sat on the grass, the tension between us softening but not gone. As we ate, he told me about his life since I'd left, how he'd come out to his family at 19, how his uncle had hugged him but his mom had gone quiet for months. She's better now, he said. But it was rough. Made me realize you gotta fight for who you are, even when it hurts. What does it mean to fight for yourself when you're not sure who you're fighting for? I wanted to tell him I admired his courage, that I wished I'd been brave enough to do the same. Instead, I said, you're good at that, making people feel like they belong. He looked at me, his expression unreadable again. Not everyone. The word stung, and I wondered if he meant me. Before I could ask, my phone buzzed. Dad, asking me to pick up supplies for the store. I stood, brushing grass off my jeans, and David followed. I'll come with, he said, like it was the most natural thing. As we drove to the hardware store, the silence in my truck felt different. Not heavy, but expectant, like the air before a storm. Ashwood streets rolled by, familiar yet distant, and I stole glances at David, his profile sharp against the window. Why does closeness sometimes feel like the edge of a cliff? At the store, we loaded paint cans and lumber, our movements syncing like they had years ago when we'd helped Dad together. But when our hands brushed reaching for the same box, we both froze, the air electric. He laughed it off, but his eyes lingered. Back at my house, Dad was asleep, the TV flickering in the living room. David followed me inside, and we ended up in the kitchen, sharing a beer. The bathroom incident hung unspoken between us, and I couldn't take it anymore. David, I started, my voice shaking. About yesterday. He held up a hand, his expression soft but serious. Jasper, you don't have to explain. I saw you, and I didn't know what to say. What do you say when the truth is a door you're afraid to open? I swallowed, my heart pounding. What did you see? He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. You, all of you. David's words hit like a wave, pulling me under. The kitchen was dim, the hum of the fridge the only sound as we stood inches apart. His eyes held mine, and for the first time, I wondered if he'd always seen me. The real me, the one I'd hidden even from myself. What does it mean to be seen when you've spent your life hiding? I wanted to speak, to ask what he meant, but my throat was tight. Instead, I grabbed another beer, handing it to him as an excuse to move, to breathe. He took it, his fingers brushing mine, and the touch sent a jolt through me. You're different now, he said, leaning against the counter. Boston changed you. Did it? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Or did it just let me be who I was? He tilted his head, studying me. And who's that, Jasper? The question was a challenge, one I wasn't ready to answer. Why do some questions feel like they're asking for your whole soul? I took a sip of my beer, the cold biting my tongue. I'm still figuring that out. He nodded like he understood more than I'd said. We moved to the living room, sinking into the old couch, the springs groaning under us. The TV played a muted football game, but neither of us watched. Instead, we talked about college, about Ashwood, about the dreams we'd had as kids. He wanted to open a youth center one day, a place where kids like us could feel safe. I told him about my work with urban green spaces, how I wanted to make cities feel alive. But beneath the words, something else simmered. Every laugh, every glance, felt like it was building toward something. What happens when you're standing on the edge of a truth you can't unsay? The next day, I found David at the community center, coaching a soccer game. The kids adored him, their shouts echoing across the field. I watched from the sidelines, my chest tight with something I couldn't name. When the game ended, he jogged over, sweat gleaming on his forehead. You stalking me now? He teased, but his smile was warm. Maybe, I shot back, grinning. You're not that hard to find. We ended up at the diner, splitting a plate of fries, the jukebox playing some old Springsteen song. The conversation turned to high school, to the nights we'd spent dreaming of leaving Ashwood. I always thought you'd never come back, he said, dipping a fry in ketchup. You were so ready to run. I admitted, but running doesn't fix everything. He leaned forward, his voice low. What are you running from now? The question cut deep, and I looked away, my eyes landing on a couple at the counter. A man and a woman, their hands intertwined, oblivious to the world. What does it feel like to love without fear? I wanted to tell David everything, to confess the feelings I'd buried for years, but the diner felt too small, too public. Instead, we walked back to his apartment above the bakery, the smell of fresh bread wafting up. His place was small but warm, books and vinyl records stacked on shelves, a guitar leaning against the wall. You still play? I asked, nodding at the guitar. Sometimes, he said, picking it up. He strummed a few chords, the sound soft and mournful. Helps me think. What do you think about when the music says what words can't? I sat on his couch, watching his fingers move over the strings, and felt the pull of something bigger than us. David, I said, my voice barely audible. I need to tell you something. He stopped playing, his eyes meeting mine. The room felt too quiet, too still. Then tell me, he said, setting the guitar down. My heart pounded. Every fear I'd ever had screaming at me to stop. But I was tired of running, tired of hiding. I've been in love with you since we were 16, I said, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. And I never said it because I was scared. Scared of you, of this town, of myself. His face softened, but he didn't speak. Why does silence sometimes feel louder than words? He stood, crossing the room to sit beside me, so close I could feel the warmth of him. "Jasper," he said finally, "I've been waiting for you to say that for years." David's words were a lifeline, pulling me from the fear I drowned in for years. The air in his apartment felt charged, every breath heavy with possibility. I searched his face, looking for a hint of doubt, but all I saw was him. Steady, open, real. "What does it mean to finally stand in the truth you've been running from?" "I didn't know," I whispered, my voice cracking. I thought you'd hate me." He laughed, soft and disbelieving. "Hate you? Jasper, you're the one person I could never hate." He reached for my hand, his fingers warm and sure, and the world seemed to tilt. "I saw you that day in the bathroom, and it wasn't just you standing there. It was everything you've been holding back." I didn't say anything because I was scared too. Scared I'd ruin us. What do you do when the person you love is just as afraid as you are? I squeezed his hand, my heart racing. "You could never ruin us." He smiled, but there was a shadow in his eyes. "This town might." Ashwood. The word hung between us, a reminder of the world outside this moment. I thought of the whispers at the diner, the sideways glances at church, the way my dad's voice tightened when he talked about certain lifestyles. David had faced it all when he came out, and I'd been gone, safe in Boston's bubble. "Let's get out of here," he said suddenly, standing and pulling me up. "Just for tonight." We drove to a lookout point on the edge of town, where the hills rolled out under a sky blazing with stars. The air was cold, but David's presence beside me was warm, grounding. We sat on the hood of my truck, sharing a blanket, the silence between us no longer heavy but soft, like a promise. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his voice quiet. "About how you felt?" I looked at the stars, searching for an answer. I didn't know how. I thought if I said it, everything would change. "It has changed," he said, turning to me. "But maybe that's not a bad thing. What does change look like when it's born from love?" I leaned closer, my shoulder brushing his, and for the first time, I let myself feel the weight of my own heart. "I'm scared, David, of what this means, of what people will say." He took my face in his hands, his touch gentle but firm. "We don't have to figure it all out tonight, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." And then he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like we were both afraid it might break. But then it deepened, and it was everything, years of longing, fear, hope, all spilling into that one moment. When we pulled apart, I was shaking, not from cold but from the sheer weight of feeling alive. We stayed there until the sky began to lighten, talking, laughing, stealing kisses under the stars. But as dawn broke, reality crept back in. I had to face my dad, the store, the town. David had his own battles, his job, his family, the weight of being out in a place like Ashwood. What does it mean to build a life when the world around you wants to tear it down? The next day, I went to the store, my mind still spinning. Dad was there, grumbling about inventory, but his eyes narrowed when he saw me. "You look different," he said, his tone suspicious. "Just tired." I lied, but my heart was pounding. How do you tell the person who raised you that you're not the son he imagined? That night, David invited me to a community center event, a talent show for the kids. I watched him MC, his energy lighting up the room, and felt a surge of pride. But I also saw the looks from some parents, the whispers when he hugged me afterward. Ashwood wasn't ready for us, and I wasn't sure I was either. As we left, a man in a trucker hat shouted something ugly from across the street. David tensed, but he didn't respond, just kept walking. "You okay?" I asked, my voice tight. "I've heard worse," he said, but his jaw was set. "You ready for this, Jasper?" Was I? The question followed me home, echoing in the quiet of my room. David's question lingered, a challenge I couldn't ignore. Was I ready? The weight of Ashwood's judgment, my dad's expectations, and my own fears pressed against the fragile hope of what we could be. What does it take to choose love over fear when the world feels stacked against you? The next morning, I found Dad in the kitchen, his coffee mug dwarfed by his calloused hands. "You've been spending a lot of time with David," he said, not looking up. His tone wasn't accusing, but it wasn't warm either. "Yeah," I said, my stomach twisting. "He's my friend." Dad's eyes met mine, sharp and searching. Just a friend. The question was a trap, and I felt the walls of the house closing in. Why do the people we love sometimes feel like the hardest ones to tell the truth? I took a breath, steadying myself. "No, Dad. He's more than that." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad set his mug down, his face unreadable. "You sure about this, Jasper?" "I'm sure," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I love him." He didn't yell, didn't storm out. He just nodded, like he was processing a language he didn't speak. "This town, it's not kind to people like you." "I know," I said, "but I can't live my life for them." What does it mean to stand up for yourself when it risks everything? Dad didn't say much after that, but the distance between us grew, a quiet ache that followed me through the day. I met David at the park, the same bench where we'd sat days before. He could tell something was wrong, his hand finding mine without a word. "I told my dad," I said, staring at the ground. "About us." He squeezed my hand. "How'd that go?" "Not great," I admitted, "but not terrible. He's trying, I think." David nodded, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "It takes time. For them, for us." We walked through the park, the autumn leaves swirling around us, and I felt the weight of the future. Ashwood wasn't our forever, but it was our now, and we had to navigate it together. Over the next week, we faced the town's whispers head-on. Some supportive, some cruel. David's strength anchored me, his laughter a reminder that love was worth fighting for. One night, we went back to the lookout point, the stars brighter than ever. "I want to build something with you," David said, his voice steady. "Not just here, but wherever we go. A life. What does a life built on love look like?" I saw it in his eyes, hope, resilience, a future we could shape together. "I want that too," I said, and meant it. We decided to leave Ashwood after Dad's recovery, to find a place where we could be ourselves without apology. Boston, maybe, or somewhere new. As we stood under the stars, I realized that David's silence that day in the bathroom hadn't been rejection. It had been recognition, a quiet promise that he saw me, all of me, and loved me anyway. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more whispers, more fights, more moments of doubt. But as I kissed David under the endless sky, I knew we'd face them together. Love doesn't erase the world's sharp edges, but it gives you the strength to walk through them. What does it mean to be truly seen? For me, it was David's silence, his presence, his unwavering belief in us. And in that, I found my courage, my home, my truth.